let's continue with our next question quickly and see. Okay, so our next question, once again, is our urban profile. As you can see, what is our urban profile? It's basically a cross-sectional point of view from the side of our urban area. In this case, definitely looks like a city. Now, just to identify, before we answer the questions, let's just quickly have a look at our urban profile. A, do you agree with me, will represent the CBD, tallest buildings. Okay, situated right in the middle. If you look at B, they mention industries. So they gave us a tip. Now keep in mind, we have two different types of industries, light and heavy. Okay, heavy industries is a type of industries who never shut down. It's usually shift works. You know, people come in at 8 o'clock in the morning, leave at 7. Then the next shift starts from 7 till 5 o'clock in the morning. Like for instance, our electricity supplies, for instance, console factories making glass, etc. Our light industries are usually industries, textile industries. Okay, and as you can see, just a tip, what do we find? This industry is situated right in between two residential areas. Okay, now, can you imagine that a heavy industry like coal, where they generate electricity, will be situated between two residential areas? I can guarantee you definitely not. Why not? Because of the amount of pollution that's being created and because of the noise pollution and air pollution. So this industry, immediately I can identify as a light industry. Why a light industry? Because it's situated right in between two residential areas. Okay. If you look at F, it's situated just on the outskirts of the CBD. And if we look at our urban profile models, we can definitely mention that F might be the zone of decay or the transition zone. Okay, just might as well mention this tall buildings over there, and even though it's not been lettered, but we can identify them as the OBD, Outgoing Business District. And once again, we've got residential areas situated next to the OBD, and then the letter E. It looks, trees are being represented over there, and I will mention that's green belts. And we can also say the rural urban fringe. What is the rural urban fringe? It's a transition zone from the urban areas to the rural areas. It's usually a buffer zone, creating what's a buffer zone? It's an area that separates two different areas, or it can be a green belt area that might be used for recreational purposes. Now, if we quickly have a look at the questions that's being asked on the diagram. Name the land use zone A. Land use zone A, tallest buildings, usually most accessible area in a city, and I am happy, I hope you as well, we can confirm it's a CBD. Name the land use zone, sorry, wrong place, just wipe that out over there. Now, if we look at name land use zone F, this is the transition zone or the zone of decay. Once again, grade 12s, what is the transition zone or the zone of decay? It's an area just surrounding the CBD with mixed functions. We're talking commercial functions, like for instance, small shops, light industries, and residential areas right in between, usually low-income residential areas. Now, if you look at question 3.1.3, which land use zone occupies most of the space? Very similar to our previous question, the residential areas. Okay, if we can identify these residential areas, let's have a go at it. The residential area closest to the CBD, what will you say? We know we can distinguish between three different residential areas. Our low-income residential areas, middle-income residential areas, and our high-income residential areas. Now, if we have a look at our urban profile, the low-income residential areas we usually find closest to the CBD. The simple reason for it is because it's less in transport cost. Okay, so people don't have to spend a lot of money on transport costs to get to work. Now, our high-income residential areas is usually furthest away because it stands with cheaper, it's bigger stands than closer to the CBD. You need to keep in mind that once we move closer, the most expensive land is still found in the CBD. That's the reason why the buildings are moving up instead of expanding outwards. And then we got a residential area over there. I'm just going to call it middle income residential areas. Okay, so if you look at question 3.1.3, which land use zone occupies the most space? Definitely our residential areas, because our urban areas focus on secondary and tertiary activities. Many job opportunities available in our urban areas. If you look at 3.1.5, which one of the two residential areas, C and D, is most likely to be the high income residential areas? Already we answered this question. There's C and D. I've mentioned that the high income residential areas are usually furthest away. Okay, probably because of bigger stands, access to major transport routes. Our low income residential areas are closest to the CBD and small industries, okay, because it reduces the amount of transport cost involved getting to work and back. Now, if you look at question 3.1.4, is industrial area B a light or heavy industrial zone? We discussed it by just looking at our urban profile, and we identified it as a light industry. Simple reason like textile industries. Okay, bakeries, for example. Now, why? Because there's going to be less pollution, noise and air pollution. And that's the reason heavy industries are usually not allowed to be inside residential areas. Then question 3.1.5, we did answer that question. Sorry, I swapped the questions around. 3.1.6, identify land use zone E. And as you can see, the land use zone E is represented on our urban profile with trees and vegetation. So I've mentioned that it's the rural-urban fringe. It's the transition zone from the urban areas to the rural areas, or it might be green belts used for recreation areas. And lastly, but not least, what's our most expensive high land value? Which land use zone has the highest land value? And we can go back to our urban profiles, definitely the CBD, because as you can see, it's high-rising buildings because the land is most expensive. It's cheaper for them to build taller buildings than expanding outwards. Okay, fantastic question. Thank you, Sipho, for this question regarding our urban profile. I just want to clear this diagram quickly. Now remember, when we look at this diagram, as you can see, the diagram over here replicates an urban profile. It shows you the CBD moving outwards from its residential areas to your light industries all the way to your rural urban fringe.